How to Become a Saint. I was looking at a very interesting book. I've read it before this morning. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And it's based on his experience in German concentration camps, Auschwitz and others during the war. All his family except one sister were killed either in gas chambers or died in concentration camp. By a series of extraordinary coincidences, he was able to survive. But the experience that he had, the total stripping of all human values, anything that he had and his fellow prisoners had to cling to that would give them a sense of dignity, of nobility, of worth, was taken away from them with insults and contempt. They were deliberately bestialized, deliberately made to feel that they were worthless, that they were nothing but pieces of machinery, and their only value in life was to do a little bit of work, and if they failed, then they would be simply killed. And most people, of course, under such circumstances succumbed and felt that there was nothing to live for. Many died of sheer despair. And yet a few, stripped down to their very core, decided that there was something still that nobody could take away from them. The deliberate affirmation of right attitude, of purpose, of meaning. And from this, he built a system of psychology that has proved to be very meaningful to many people. One of the interesting questions he asks people who come, I don't know that he's living anymore, I think he isn't, but anyway, did ask at least, people when they came into his office was, why don't you commit suicide? And again, what happens as a result of this rather daring question is that people say, well, but there is still something to live for. And then he starts helping them to build on that something. We need, in a sense, really to get back to that core of our being if we want to become saints in this lifetime. We are all too easily carried along by the comforts, by the security, the insurance policies, the friends, the comfortable home. How would you be if, not necessarily in a concentration camp, but if you found yourself suddenly stripped of everything that gives most people's lives meaning and value? Bank accounts, job, respect, security, a future to look forward to, all of these things. How would you be? Would you be really, I know in the last Depression, many men were very, very, especially men, because they had sort of defined their value in terms of their jobs. Men who suddenly lost high position, many of them committed suicide or ended up feeling very as if their lives didn't have any real worth. They developed great inferiority complexes. Many people, as a result of, in fact, there was a very interesting, if cruel, experiment. I don't approve of the experiment, but I'm fascinated by the results. In many classes in psychiatry, the students were separated into groups of 3. And 2 of these 3 were told to treat the third with condescension, contempt, indifference. And what they discovered was that within a week, all of those third students were manifesting in some degree or another the classic symptoms of senility. Forgetfulness and absent-mindedness and not being able to remember things that they'd said, and all of the symptoms. It's a very interesting thing that senility, if it's a disease, there's nothing you can do about it, but to a large extent what happens is that people lose their sense of purpose and suddenly they feel as if they didn't have any value because they haven't value in the eyes of others. This is what made that extraordinary experience in Auschwitz so important to the few who were able to really face it properly, that they didn't have the respect of anyone, and they had to just go into themselves and find where they were and what they were really living for. If you want to become a saint, you must, in a way, go through that experience. That is to say, you must strip yourself of the opinions of other people, the assurances of other people. You must strip yourself of the desire to agree in order to be agreed with, and to applaud in order to be applauded. You must strip yourself of any kind of dependence upon a world that won't be yours very much longer anyway, upon a life that is really basically a dream. There's nothing real to it. We're all just figments in the divine imagination. And if we really face up to that, then we can become saints. If we don't, we may become good theologians, we may become good devotees even. But a saint is one who realizes that there's only one value in life, and that's one that comes from within himself. It doesn't come from outside. It doesn't depend upon people saying you did a good job. It comes from not even thinking about the job. It comes from thinking about what you have to do in order to find who you are. Most of the existentialists, and this book is an example of modern existential philosophy, but most of the existentialists haven't come up with Viktor Frankl's positive view of human nature. They accept nihilism. They accept that there aren't any real values in life, that nobody's likely to treat you well, and so they come up with a very self-centered, ego-centered philosophy. His philosophy isn't that. If you really go within yourself, what you'll discover is that bedrock reality that in fact unites you to everybody. When you depend upon others outwardly, you'll always be separate, you'll always be alone, because aloneness is the human condition. We've come naked into this world and we'll go the same way. We've come without anybody. We're born into a family and suddenly we have people, but when we go without all of them once again. If we can really understand that the purpose of life is within, that we have to... Now here's the difference between the existentialists and the yogis. We have to not so much create it as discover it. Viktor Frankl, when he asked people the question, why don't you commit suicide, invites them to give invented answers. And one will say, well, I don't commit suicide because my children need me, or my husband needs me, or I'm working on a painting and I want to finish it, or many other reasons. I was reminded in saying that about the painting of a friend of mine who was walking in the mountains, and he felt something hit his foot, and he looked at his foot and he saw two little marks like a snake's bite, and he thought that he was going to die. He thought he'd been bitten by a snake, and he knew that he was so far from any kind of help that there was nothing to do but sit there and die, and he was in the middle of a book. So he thought, well, at least let me finish this book. So he sat down and read like mad. After some 10 or 15 minutes, he didn't feel any worse, and so finally he realized it was a thorn that had gotten into his, and not a snake. But this desperate attachment to something so trivial was amusing and partly also inspiring, because it showed he was at least not attached to the things that normally aren't trivial, like body and life and so on. But the meanings that we attribute to life, those which existentialists invite us to seek, are generally invented meanings, things that we say, well, my nature is such that I want to do so and so. Like Sartre, he was the prize example of nihilistic existentialism. And what Sartre invited people to do was discover who they were, even if it was criminal. Just be true to yourself, he said. In his play, Orestes kills his mother, and then goes before the people and says, "You see me, men of Argos, a true man, a free man. I have finally done that which was my own." In other words, nothing in society ever would teach you to kill your own mother, and therefore he was acting from his inner self, and he was being true to that self. And so Sartre was making a preposterous point, but it does at least help to clear the air. Because if we are if we are really to find who we are, we have to face the possibility that in that discovery we'll find that we're totally different from anybody else, and maybe we are something criminal. And we should be true to ourselves and have the courage to be true to ourselves, no matter what anybody says, no matter what tradition says, no matter what the Bible says. Okay, so far so good. But the difference between the yogi and the existentialist, as I said, is that the yogi understands that it's a voyage of discovery, not a voyage of invention. This was not a discovery on his part, it was an invention. He wasn't really being true to himself, he was perhaps reacting against what other people said. I noticed back in the hippie era in the 60s that the young hippies were so determined to rebel against all social mores. It was sort of an existentialist philosophy that they had. But if you didn't grow your hair long, you weren't fit to be a hippie. If you didn't talk a certain jargon, you weren't fit to be a hippie. They were just as bound as anybody else, bound by their own cult. And if any one of them stepped out of line, he was put down by all the others too. It was very much of a faddish kind of thing, just as much as any other. You can't just spend your life reacting against. You've got to find deep down inside you who you really are. And as I say, we should have the courage to face the possibility that in making that discovery we'll be made aware of something very unpleasant, something that we'd rather weren't so. But whatever you are, that's where you've got to start. So far, so good. But what has been, because we're by no means pioneers in this. People have made this voyage of discovery down through the ages. People have gone into their inner self and found at their very depths who they were. And what they discovered in every case was that, in fact, going down within did not separate them, as the existentialists have imagined, did not separate them from their fellow man, but united them with their fellow man. United them on a deeper level than conversation. It reminds me of a period in Mount Washington when we decided, all the monks there, that we wanted to be more with each other. We were so busy working all the time and meditating on our own and so on, and we decided we live here, we should become more of a real family. So we used to do things together. We'd go on picnics and we would play games together and listen to music together and all sorts of things like this. And it was nice. There's no doubt about that. It was fun. It was enjoyable, and we did develop a certain sense of family. But then we decided to go into seclusion for a week together. And we couldn't all leave our work at once, and so we weren't in complete seclusion, but during even our working hours we didn't speak. And as much as possible we meditated together and didn't speak at all that whole week. It was extraordinary how at the end of that week, how much closer we felt than we'd ever felt doing things together and talking together and having fun together. That we reached a level of communion that was underneath those things which separate people, making one person seem like another person from the other. And suddenly we were one. This level of discovery of yourself is the way to discover, yes, who you are on deeper levels, but also who everybody is. Because we're all really made of the same cloth. We're dyed different colors, but we're the same material. And underneath all this, what we are in our souls is joy, is love. There isn't a single saint, or let me say, there isn't a single person who meditated and reached that level of awareness, which we would call saint, but leave that word out of the picture for the moment. and just say there isn't a single person who has made this voyage who, having found some kind of bedrock reality, has turned cynical or bitter. Every one of them manifests certain qualities that are unique to everybody. They all have love. They don't all manifest it in the same way. They all have kindness and compassion and joy. Each one manifests it in his own way. But they all find that basically we are made of God. We are made by Him. We are made of Him in the sense that that's what we are. Jesus said that no man can come down from heaven save he who went up to no man can go to heaven save he who came down from heaven. That is to say, we are merely in going into heavenly states of consciousness, we are merely reclaiming our own. Sorrow is not reality. Evil is not reality. Selfishness, pride, hatred, all these things are not who we really are. They are what we do in order to protect this ego. The existentialists who think of themselves as just the ego naturally develop all those thoughts and try to justify the impulse of the ego to protect itself by striking out, by harming others, by talking against others, and they'll say, I'm being true to myself. They haven't understood what their self is yet. They are being really foolish. But people who go down deeper under that ego and discover this central core of the self, they suddenly discover that that self is the self of all, that they even know the thoughts and feelings of all, that they enter into the lives of all. This is reality. To become a saint, you must have that willingness then to seek that and to know that nothing else matters, nothing else even is. When you have that kind of sincerity, then I think to become a saint will be very easy. Because it isn't all that big a project to know who you are. The big project is to forget who you aren't. You have to get rid of all. It's like that sculptor who was asked how he did such a beautiful sculpture of an elephant, and he said it was very simple. I had a piece of stone and I cut away everything that didn't look like an elephant. And it's an interesting way of putting it, but what we have to do in a sense is that too about our own growth, to cut away all those things which we are not. But I'd say that the two were necessary, to have a vision of the elephant and have a vision of that which is not the elephant. That is to say, on the one hand, in your own mind, understand clearly and keep telling yourself, in every circumstance, have a part of your mind that's behind there saying, is this really I? No. Then let me not associate with it in my heart. Let me do what I have to do, but never say that, never define myself in terms of that. Then the next thing is to have the positive image of what we're looking for, if not based on our actual experience, then based on what many people have said that gives us something to hope for. But more than that, indeed it should be based on our positive experience. Viktor Frankl's question, for example, why don't you commit suicide? And the person's answer, because my children need me, because I love my family. Even though everything else seems black, at least there's this little thing to cling to. Well, cling to what does make your life meaningful to you, but explore that meaning more and more deeply. What is it you love about your family? What is it you love about your children, your husband, your wife? Well, because they're such fun to be with, or whatever. That's not enough. Keep probing more and more deeply. Why do I want that? I want them because I want love. But would I want them if they hated me, if they ceased to love me, if they started turning against me? No, I wouldn't want them, possibly. Then would you be willing to commit suicide? No, because I still realize that what I wanted from them, I still want. I want love. All right, then where are you going to find love? Oh, from this beautiful boy, this beautiful girl, from this lovely friend, whatever it might be. But that too can change. Feelings change, people change, they die if nothing else. what are you left with? You're still left with the longing for love. And the more you seek and probe, the more you discover that that love isn't something that can be defined by another person. It's an abstraction. You identify it with people, but it's really something abstract. And in a way, it's really a reflection of you. What we love in others is something that we see in them of ourselves. There are many aspects to them that we can't touch because we don't recognize ourselves in them. It's sort of like a portrait painter who no matter how many different people he paints, you always see himself in those people. That's true, isn't it? I think that's true of every portrait painter. That's true of every writer. That's true of every poet. That's true of everybody. That people, when they judge others, they're really judging themselves. When they don't like others, it's really something in themselves that they don't like, and that's an infallible rule. If there's something that you're criticizing in somebody else, watch yourself to see what it is that makes you criticize that as opposed to everything else. You don't criticize dogs for being dogs. Why do you criticize people who are a lot higher than dogs for being something a lot less bestial, let's say, than a dog? Because you can see something of yourself in them, and you wish you weren't like that. And the same thing is true in a positive way. What do you love about people? We love ourselves. What is it we love about dogs? It's very curious to find that in India they don't think that much of dogs, but they love cows. Why do they love cows? Well, look at the cow. It's gentle, it's ruminative, it's peaceful. It sort of sits there and watches life go by. It gives milk in a motherly and loving way. All of these things the philosophical Indian can relate to. He loves the cow because he loves himself. And what makes Americans love dogs? Well, they're always rushing around after obscure things that you don't quite know what. They're always chasing their own tails. They're very affectionate toward everybody. They're friendly and they bounce up and down with enthusiasm. And Americans love dogs. They love themselves. Why did the ancient Egyptians love cats? Maybe because they were inscrutable. And what you're really loving is not just your personality, but your deeper self, ultimately. We're loving an abstraction. We should build on the positive things that we have in life and then try to understand why we're seeking ourself in this. What is it that we're really looking for? And if we trace that search to its final conclusion, we're bound to come to the fact that what we really want is love itself. What we really want is joy, not that beautiful house by the ocean, which we thought would give us joy, but we want joy in ourselves. It's a mistake to go on identifying that joy with mere things, but the fact that people identify it with so many things in life should give them a clue. So last year it was a sofa, and this year it's a new car. But the joy is constant, the sofa and the car and so on are not. It's joy you're looking for. So if you want to be a saint, get your directions very clear. Know what it is that you don't want. You don't want to be fooled. You don't want delusion. You don't want to think that, that people slideshow of mine that I put together that many of you saw last Tuesday really in a way said it all. Because it was so interesting to see these different faces of people who were quite obviously going down a dead-end street. Quite obviously their way of thinking and living was going to lead them toward less and less real awareness, less and less real understanding. And then seeing pictures of people who had an inner life, even those who weren't on the path. And you could see that something was growing. And then you saw pictures of devotees. And you saw such beauty in their faces, even if the faces themselves weren't necessarily beautiful in the normal human way. But I remember we went to a lecture of a very great man, I think, Richard Wurmbrand. He's a Baptist minister who, again, through being in communist prisons, gained greatness, attained greatness. And he was lecturing here, and quite a few people from Ananda went there. And he came to know that they were with my group there, and different ones asked questions. And one of the girls in the group got up to ask a question, and he turned to me and he said, "Is it a condition for joining your community that all the women be beautiful?" And I said, "No, they become beautiful. But this is the truth, that you become beautiful when you live in beauty, when you live in joy and in love. That this changes your whole aspect. You can see it in people's lives. You can see where they are headed. And if they are headed in the right way, then it begins to shine in their faces. The enthusiasm of a young person who thinks that he's going to go out and become a rock star, let's say, check that against what he's like after he's become one, and you'll find that in many cases it isn't very attractive. But if you see people over a period of years not living with that joy that comes merely as an anticipation, but living in that joy that has come from living in the right way, not anticipation but fulfillment, then you may see that, this is the way to go because it seems to work. To become a saint, you must be sincere. You must be sincere with God. That's really all He asks of us. He has all your wisdom. He doesn't need it from you. He has all the power in the universe. He doesn't need it from you. And for your own sake, it may be good to go out and do good jobs, good works, to serve other people, to do good things. But the world doesn't need that from you. You need to give it because that's how you grow. If the people that I help weren't able to get it from me, they'd get it if it's their karma, and it has to be their karma if they get it from me. We don't have to feel needed. We have to realize that God has everything, lacking only one, our love. And if we really love Him seriously, sincerely, then He responds. And He responds very quickly, according to the measure of our love. If we really love Him, we can ask anything of Him and He'll give it to us, and it works. The only thing is that you don't quite know where to draw the line between detour and blessing. So He's asked you for this car, and you get the car, and then you forget Him. Was that really a blessing, or was it a detour? You have to learn to ask for the right things and in the right way. Let this be so if you wish it, if it's for my spiritual welfare. But the great romance of our lives is that search for His love and His joy. Once we get into that, we come necessarily away from the attitude of sectarianism, of institutionalism, and so on. If you really want to be a saint, you don't think about that side of it so much. You think more in terms of being absolutely naked before God, that nothing matters except your relationship with Him. I remember a talk I was having with a woman a few years ago at it was a ceremony that I attended in San Francisco, and afterwards the people were milling about and I was chatting with her, and we talked for a while, and then she said, "By the way, my name is so-and-so, what's yours?" And I said, "Well, I'm Swami Kriyananda." And she sort of gasped and said, "What, but you're famous?" And I said, "Well, sure, why, but why but?" And she said, "Well, but you seem normal." And I realized that I suppose that you either expect people who are well known, or maybe most people who are well known are, at least I know that that's true in many cases, that they define themselves in terms of what other people define them as. And they become slaves of that definition. So that you write a certain type of music and you're not allowed by your public to do anything else. It would be very good not to allow any kind of definition that's placed upon you by others to be accepted by you. That whether you're famous or infamous, whether you're loved or not loved, whether People think you do well or not well. These things are not you, none of them. You are just naked before God. Live in the thought. This is the peril of institutions, of getting you trapped into thinking that you're doing something that can take you, that is so important that you forget about this basic thing of all. Even in doing spiritual work, think of it as between you and God above all. In this way there is freedom. In this way there is growth. Your job in this life is to become a saint. What is a saint? Well, there are many levels of definition. The highest would be one who has achieved oneness with God, one who has realized God. But it's also valid to say that everybody who is sincerely seeking may be called a saint. He's on the path to becoming a complete saint. But as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, even the worst sinner in the world, if he steadfastly meditates and seeks me, should be considered among the saintly. Whatever you are, the point of saying it this way is that it is not a sign of humility, it's a sign of delusion, to excuse your failings by saying, I'm not a saint. Saint Teresa of Avila said that was the last thing she wanted her nuns to say. She said, I don't want to hear anybody saying, I'm not a saint. You're here to become one. Then the sort of orthodoxly trained ego will say, but who am I to presume? God is the one who makes us saints. Not entirely. Why should he? He doesn't play favorites. He accepts you when you accept him. Who are the chosen of God? Master said, God chooses those who choose him. When we make that choice, then he's already given us his commitment from the beginning of time. We are his. There's nothing that he has to make up his mind about. We are the ones who have to make up our minds. It's like that disciple that Yogananda scolded, and the disciple said, well, I know I need to change, Master, but how can I change without your blessings? Master said, well, my blessings are there already. God's blessings are there already. It's your blessings that are lacking. We have to make up our minds to become saints, live in the thought that we are saints, as long as we don't allow that thought to become a comparative one relative to other people's opinions. We need to think of ourselves as saints in the sense that we are completely sincere in our inner dedication to God. But that sincerity becomes very much diluted when you think of your sainthood in terms of other people's opinions of your sainthood. You shouldn't be a saint to impress other people. You shouldn't be a saint to impress yourself. But you should try to be a saint to impress on yourself the importance of clinging to that reality in spite of everything, so that no matter how many times you fall, you get up and try again. Like this morning with my chair. No matter how many times, if you keep trying, Master said a saint is a sinner who never gave up. In this way, he's speaking of a saint as having arrived. But we can speak of a saint also as that sinner not giving up. As long as you don't give up, cling to the vision of what you have chosen to become. Remember that it all comes down to your choice, no one else's. God's not going to be able to do it for you. God's not going to sit around forgiving all the things you've done. You're going to have to forgive yourself. He's already forgiven you. I remember this one disciple who Yogananda was scolding, and the disciple said, "Well, sir, you will forgive me, won't you?" Master looked very sort of surprised for a second. He said, "Well, what else can I do?" He had no grudge against anybody. He didn't know how to get angry. It was simply that he scolded because they needed this help, but it was with love and forgiveness that he scolded. God's love is always there. You need to convince yourself of it by making well, it wouldn't even hurt to say that even if God doesn't love me, I at least have control over my own destiny and I can make him love me. It would be not true because he does, but you can't be waiting for somebody else to do things for you. What you must do is determine that you choose of your own free will to assume those attitudes, to explore those attitudes that will bring you freedom and joy, rather than accept those attitudes put upon you usually by the world of negativity and loss of hope and so on. No matter how people treat you, you have the opportunity, you have the freedom to choose to love them. No matter what they think of you, you have the freedom always to think and choose how you think of them. Don't be influenced. Don't like somebody because he likes you. Don't admire somebody because he admires you. Be free in your own mind to think, well, how do I feel? Do I feel that this is right for me? This situation is right for me? That job is right for me? Whatever it might be. The more you can live this way, the more you will come to that level of freedom. One thought I should add to that is that this does not mean that you reject guidance, that you reject the importance of obedience, of cooperation, of other people's opinions out of hand. You merely have to see them for yourself and accept them for yourself. Then you can do them better. But simply to reject because you want to reject, this is as much bondage as accepting because you want to accept. Understand from within. I found that this was so with Master's teachings. I didn't want to merely parrot something that he said. I had total faith in what he said. I was sure that he knew what he was talking about. But merely to quote something that he said without understanding it myself, I didn't want to do that. And so for years, I would meditate on things that he said before I would dare repeat them to other people. And when I felt them deeply within myself and felt that I'd understood at least a certain level of what he was talking about, then I could share up to the experience that I had had. This is what we need to do, that even though people give us a job to do, if they're in charge of us, naturally it would be a disharmonious thing for yourself to say no, or I don't feel to do it. This is the way some people manage it. Ability to do that which needs to be done, regardless of your feeling, is a way of achieving that degree of freedom inside that will enable you to make free choices. Whereas if you think free choice is merely doing what you want, you've got a lot to learn. But always it must come also from inside. You must do it as your own free choice rather than being driven to it. Say, I choose to obey because in this way I will grow. In this way I promote harmony. In this way I serve a larger cause rather than just my own ego. Everything that you do should finally come down to a matter of deliberate choice and not habit and not blind obedience, not blind just sort of walking here and there because you're told to walk here and there. The one trouble with institutions, and we've done our very best to keep it out of Ananda, and I think we've been very good at it, that whenever, for example, we think of a job that needs doing and we think of people who could do that job, our first question is, will it help that person? And then if we think it'll help that person, we consider it further, whether it's a good thing for the work or not. But most institutions don't do it that way. Most institutions think in terms of their own convenience. And they'll put somebody who's good at something in a job that he may no longer need to do for his growth. And that is something that people who are Those of you who work in institutions, it would help you very much, I think, to keep in mind the thought that the most important resource you have is people. And the more you can help to develop those people in their own potential, the more the institution itself will thrive. We've found this to be true here at Ananda, that many times, simply because we couldn't find anybody for the job for whom the job also would be right, we've let the job languish. And anybody who writes books on subjects of how to organize and how to be a good administrator and so on would think I was mad. But Ananda has thrived, and I've seen that many institutions that have gone the other way have not thrived. Because when you nurture people, those people make the thing worthwhile and make it work. People are a lot more important than projects, but projects become the goal for most group endeavors. Don't let yourself be swept by the sort of mania, the hysteria of mass consciousness, whether a small mass or a large. Don't let yourself be swept up in fads, but go along by, even you can go along with a fad. You don't have to fight it just because everybody's doing it. Sometimes what everybody does is right. Not often, I admit, but sometimes. And if you choose in yourself, then you can decide, I think this is right. But always, whatever comes to your attention, don't think in terms of, well, what did I say yesterday, or what have we always done, or what have other people done? Because every moment in eternity is its own moment. Every moment is unique. And what was right yesterday may not be right today. Always, when you're confronted with something, instead of going by habit, always sort of go into yourself and think, well, what is right? What should be done? What is true to my own self? Always think of it in these terms, and you'll find that then you begin to guide your life by truth, and not by opinion, not by desire, not by attachment. Then, of course, comes the obvious, and these things we don't need to talk about that much, and yet they are obvious because they're fundamentally important. Service, meditation, love. You can't find God without love. Sri Yukteswar said that you can't put a single foot in front of the other on the path until you develop this natural love of the heart. People who have been mental all their lives will say, well, my nature isn't devotional. Or they may take it to the point of saying, well, I'm not sentimental. But the truth is that everybody has this love. They may not all express it in the same way. A person who is more of a jnani, when other people are dancing and singing and chanting, he may just be quiet in his own self, but he'll be dancing in his self. It isn't his nature to express it outwardly, but he will still have that childlike quality if he has this natural love in the heart. The wish to live with love, to live for God, all of these things are helpful to us to develop in our relation with other people. We've been born into this world and not onto a barren planet in order to learn very important lessons. If indeed you see yourself in other people, then it's very helpful to use them as mirrors, so that if you find something in others that you don't like and realize then that it's something in you, then isn't it a help that you saw it in them? You weren't seeing it in you until you saw it and criticized it or judged it in somebody else, and then that gave you the incentive to look within. To serve other people is a way of serving God, and it develops attitudes of service that helps you very much in your service of God. Our dealings with people, Master said that you cannot win God's love if you haven't the capacity to win the love of your fellow creatures. The world is sort of our anvil on which we beat out the sharp sword of discrimination. We need the world. We need the experiences of others. We need understanding, first of all, the need to get within ourselves and find our own center. Then, with that, so we no longer become merely an echo, with that understanding, we definitely need feedback. We need to see in the reactions of others whether we are right or not. We don't have to accept their opinion, but if we go within ourselves and think, why are they saying that about me? We may find that they may well be right, and that there is something that we have to change. Then we have to make that choice within ourselves and say, all right, I accept what they've said. It's a very good practice to allow people whom you dislike, or before whom you don't want to lose face, or people whose opinions you don't very much respect, or people who you feel, like children perhaps, don't have enough experience to teach you anything. It's a very good practice, especially in such cases, to listen. It's natural to listen to your friends. They're likely to agree with you. It's not natural in the human way to listen to your enemies, but it may be a great deal more rewarding sometimes. Even if you know that they aren't being fair to you and that they're being prejudiced and so on, it's good for you to listen just because it's a good affirmation on your part to make yourself listen, to be open to the possibility, even though you are sure that they don't understand, to be open to the possibility that they might indeed understand, because that openness will prepare you for further growth. You will find also, very often, those people, if you are open to them, those people from whom you think to get the least, you will sometimes get a real jewel, as sort of Divine Mother's reward for having listened, for having set your ego aside and been open to her guidance from whatever source. Remember that little story in the autobiography where Lahiri Mahashai was at the Kumbh Mela, and he saw all these sadhus there who were there just very superficial, worldly, not spiritually inclined at all, and he was sort of forming a certain mental criticism when all of a sudden he looked and he saw Babaji kneeling before one of these sadhus that he'd been criticizing. And he was so surprised to see this great, as he used to call Babaji, the Ancient One, to see him washing the feet of some silly, obviously frivolous and not deep sadhu, just was in it for the glory or whatever. He said, "Sir, what are you doing here?" And Babaji said, "I'm washing the feet of this sadhu, and after that I'll clean his utensils. I'm doing this in order that I may learn that virtue, that supreme virtue, loved by God above all others, humility." Lahiri Mahashai was well rebuked. Because indeed we should see God in all, and it's a very good practice to see Him in those in whom we are least likely to find Him. And sometimes, as a reward for seeking Him that way, He will show Himself to us that way. Sometimes a foolish person, sometimes even an idiot, will suddenly say something that you needed to hear, just because you listened. People are wiser than they know, and sometimes their soul speaks through them, even without their knowledge, because they happen to be absent-minded for a moment, perhaps. Always keep that attitude toward others, of humility, of openness, of service, being serviceful to God in them rather than to them as individuals. This is love. In your meditations, pray for love, pray for devotion. Love or devotion, it's not a sentiment. It's just a deep hunger for knowledge, for high experience, for recognition and retrieving the awareness of that which you really are. It's like somebody living next door to a restaurant and knowing that it may be a very famous restaurant, but never going because he's not hungry. Why should he go if he's not hungry? Hunger is that which makes you go to the other end of the desert looking for food. That kind of hunger for God, when you have it, like one devotee came to a saint and wanted to be accepted as a disciple. And the saint said, "Come with me," and he took him down to the river, and he held the devotee's head under water until the devotee started thrashing about and really showing agony, and then the saint let him come up. And he said, "What did you want more than anything else when your head was being held down there?" And he said, "Air." He said, "When you want God like that, come back." We have to want God like that. All the techniques, all the practices, the fact of being on a path that gives all these high experiences, that won't mean anything to you unless you put them to work, unless you seek in love. Love is more important than anything else. Techniques are a way of facilitating the development of love, but they are not a substitute for love, except in this respect, that if you really seek, if you really meditate deeply, you cannot but eventually begin to feel that which is so lovable that you'll fall in love anyway, in love with God. You can't get into that stillness of meditation and not begin to feel as if you were, as if under a waterfall of peace, just being drenched in this wonderful flow, and then not to love it would be impossible. So, devotion is something to be developed by chanting, by mantra, by japa, by thinking of God, by serving God in others, and also by meditation. With or without devotion, the devotion will come if you sincerely try. But without that devotion, you won't be going very, very fast. So work hard on devotion. Sing those chants that give you devotion. Like that think of God in ways that give you a longing for Him. We all have certain things that we long for. That person who would not commit suicide because of love of family, then why not think of God as your family? In other words, whatever it is that you really want in life, think that God is in that, and that it's really Him that I'm seeking. Don't exclude Him and say, well, I don't want that, I really want God, and all you're doing is suppressing a desire. Say, no, I love, it's because I love God that I'm seeking Him in this, and it may be my mistake to seek Him in this, but at least through this let me seek Him. You'll find that in this more positive way that you will turn everything into a channel for your devotion. That's why we think of God not only as some sort of cosmic abstraction, we think of Him as her, if we like, as the Divine Mother. We think of Him not just as an it, but a him, a friend, a beloved, a father, a mother. Think of Him also that way, that whatever it is that you most love, if mother love is something very dear to you, then why not think of God as your mother? God is your mother. God came to you through your mother. God is everything. And anything that you love, if you love Him, as if seeing Him through the window of that fulfillment, you will find that on the other side of that, you have come closer to Him. Everything that you have, offer back to Him or invite Him to enter into it with you. Either way comes back to the idea of offering it back to Him, because you get closer and closer to that thought of Him. Let everything, if you want to really be a saint, let everything be drenched in the thought of Him, so that everything is referred back to Him. A very good practice is to think of God always in the second person. We're trained, sort of conditioned, I should say, to think of God more in the third person. What would He think about this? Would He like this? Think of Him as you. Thou, it's unfortunate that we've lost the use of the pronoun thou in the English language, because thou is that which you would normally use to address your nearest and dearest. In the times when they used such an expression, they would say thou to their family members, but never to a stranger. And thus to say thou to God meant an affirmation that you're my family, you're mine, you're my own. But now, because we never use it except in relation to God, thou knowest, and so on, it tends to become, to most people's minds, sort of pushing Him a little bit at a distance. It sounds formal. And so to say you, which is the way you do talk to your friends in English, is sweeter in a way. To talk with God, to share all the time, whatever thought that comes into your mind, say we are having this thought. Share your thoughts with him. Ask him questions. If you have a desire, tell him, well, I have this desire. And if it's a real desire, say it with force. You will find that he will satisfy that desire. And don't be caught by the desire, but recognize that he's the one who gave it to you, and that it's really him that you love. I say him because it's our Western tradition, although in truth I always think of God in my own nature as my mother. But this is a subjective thing for each one to figure out. Traditionally we think of God as the masculine, but that doesn't make it literally at all valid. God is anything that you want him to be. He will come to you in such a way as to fulfill your own desires and expectations of him, and these may sometimes take on very outlandish garbs indeed. But God is your friend. He's not your judge. You are your judge. God is your friend. Don't think when you've made a mistake that, oh, I don't want God to see this, I hope God's not angry. You may be angry with yourself. God's love is always there. No matter what you do, his love is unconditional. I'll never forget meeting my guru. Mind you, I'd never read all these books. Most of you who have come here have read a lot about yoga and spiritual teaching and so on. I hadn't really done anything. I'd tried to read the Bible, and I got bogged down in the begats. So-and-so begat so-and-so, and so on, and it just lost meaning for me. I didn't reach that part of the Bible which is so meaningful. And then I found a book called The Short World Bible, and I read a few excerpts from different religions. Those from the Indian religion were very inspiring to me for their cosmic view of life and for their stress on experience as opposed to mere belief, and for the dynamic personal love that they felt for God, rather than just talking of God in theological terms. And the next book I read was the Bhagavad Gita, which was very short. And then I read the autobiography, and having read the autobiography, I took the next bus virtually, non-stop across the country, and became a disciple. All of this within just about a week. And I knew in my heart this is what I had to do. I've never for a moment doubted it in all these 36 years since then. But it was definitely a whirlwind courtship, and I didn't know. I was absolutely stunned when kneeling in front of Master, because he accepted me just as quickly. And he normally didn't. He made people wait weeks, months. But there was just some strange karma there. And within that first interview, he had me kneel in front of him, and he accepted me as his disciple. And he said to me something that absolutely, in the modern term, blew my mind. He said, I give you my unconditional love. I'd never heard anybody think of such a thing. It was just an amazing statement to make. And then he asked me if I would give him mine. What could I say but yes? But that kind of love is what the Masters have for us. That kind of love is what God has for us. And if we could really be confident of that, as that wonderful statement, one of the most beautiful statements any saint ever made, the Curé d'Ars, said that if you only knew how much God loves you, you would die for joy. What a statement, and yet people are always thinking, oh, God punishes me, God doesn't like me, God hates me. They hate themselves, but God never will. If you want to be a saint, try constantly to convince yourself that He's there. Try to be open to His there-ness. Try to be open to His presence all the time. And you will find coming into you such a requital of your love as you'll never get from another human being. Such a completeness in that love that you'll never find anywhere else. That is who you really are, and He loves you because He's loving Himself in you. If you will love Him that way, more than Kriya Yoga, more than anything else, that is what will make you a saint. And then Kriya Yoga and the different techniques are wonderful for helping the unfoldment of this upward flowing energy. But it's the energy, it's the personal affirmation, it's the personal dedication of ourselves to Him that will make us really know Him. When that love is perfect, then He will come to you.